New NATO military bases could be about to appear on Russia's borders with Eastern Europe. Foreign ministers from the alliance are discussing whether to bolster their presence following the crisis in Ukraine. It will put pressure on Moscow, which has kept its own military movements within Russia's borders. RT's Gainatra Chakan reports.
The U.S. is raising the alarm over Russia conducting military exercises on its own territory.
I raised with the foreign minister our strong concern about these forces.
That's despite the U.S. sending its own troops, warships and fighter jets around the world for drills in Eastern Europe right on Russia's doorstep. The referendum in Crimea that saw the region join Russia is now touted as a reason to bolster NATO.
We do more to ensure that a regular NATO presence among some of these states that may feel vulnerable is executed.
It stated that the motivating force behind the move is to guarantee Europe's security.
It undermines security by creating war expectations, war hysteria, war propaganda.
The contrast between what NATO says and what NATO does became most obvious in the 1990s, when the military alliance started expanding eastward, despite a promise given to Moscow before the collapse of the Soviet Union.
The fact that we are ready not to place a NATO army outside of German territory gives the Soviet Union a firm security guarantee.
Fast forward 24 years.
The accession of Eastern European countries to NATO was one of the greatest success stories of our time, but the task is not yet complete.
In 1990, when the commitment was made to Moscow not to expand, 16 nations were part of NATO. Later, 12 more joined, all of them dotted close to the Russian frontier. More members could be on their way.
We're talking about the expansion of a global military network that can strike anywhere and has, at a moment's notice, can overwhelm other nations with military superiority, which is unmatched. And again, the only time in history where one country has had that sort of unchallenged military superiority and the ability to deploy and to employ it.
After the U.S. offered a helping hand to put a new government in Kiev, Ukraine is now holding talks with the military alliance in Brussels, although officials maintain its joining NATO is not a priority for the country, just yet.
It's a time for all of us to stand with the Ukrainian people in support of their territorial integrity and their sovereignty, and we are doing that.
In response to the U.S. and its allies calling Russia an aggressor, a joke emerged on social media. An image of Russia encircled by NATO bases, saying, "Russia wants war. Look how close they put their country to our bases." On a more serious note,
they intend to get Russia so unbalanced with military threats on so much of its frontier that it won't feel comfortable in the future getting in Washington's way when Washington wants to invade Syria or when Washington wants to invade Iran or whatever Washington wants to.
65 years ago, 12 nations signed the North Atlantic Treaty in this building in the U.S. Capitol. The military alliance was designed to counter the threat from the Soviet Union. The threat disappeared when the Soviet Union collapsed, but instead of winding down operations, NATO kept expanding, moving closer and closer to Russia's borders. So should it come as a surprise that Russia no longer believes U.S. claims about NATO's goals and plans for the future? In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chakan, RT.